To go. We have all the commissioners online and we're live.
Okay, well, good morning. It is Tuesday, January 26, 2020, and I call the regular board meeting to order. And at this time, just like to ask if Commissioner Peck, if you, as to a moment of silence or a prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make just a brief remark and then have a brief moment of silence. I want people to understand the purpose. So my faith is with me wherever I go, but I don't attend these meetings to engage in theological exchange any more than I go to church to engage in political discourse. I offer my prayers privately before our board meetings, where I can do so without restraint and without treading on the religious sensitivities or liberties of any of my constituents. That's my purpose for preferring a moment of silence over a prayer. And I would ask at this time for 20 seconds or whatever, take a moment to pray in our own fashion to our own, and invoke whatever support we individually choose for the success of our meeting. So with that, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Commissioner Peck. Now, if everybody would please stand and we'll say the pledge. I pledge allegiance
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
Okay, Keith, it looks like first thing on the agenda is an update from Potts and Associates. Are they on the line?
Zach, are you on the line? Does not sound like they're joined us yet.
Okay, do you want me to continue down? And the next item on the agenda is the certificate of appreciation for Peter McInderfer.
That's correct.
Okay. Dear Mr. McInderfer, on behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service from September 16th, 1999 through the end of this month, January 29th, 2021. A majority of your years of service as chief appraiser with the assessor's office from 2004 through 2018, and as the Franklin County assessor since January of 2019. Your contributions to the county and your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you just know how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. Thank you, Peter. Is there anybody else that would like to say a word to Pete?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Peck. I suppose as the individual in the meeting who probably served the longest with Pete, I would just say that I don't know that I've encountered any other elected officials in our county who have been more dedicated to the principles of fairness and equity and doing things properly than Pete McInderfer. I think it's a huge loss for the county to see him move on.
Thank you, Commissioner Peck. Commissioner Mullen, I think that you got too acquainted with Mr. McInderfer, but he was a hardworking individual and he will be missed. If you'd like to say a word or two.
Just to thank him for his years of service, and like I said, didn't really have a chance to work with him very long. I had to be new into office myself, so I do appreciate all the time he has put in, and I wish him the best of luck in his new endeavor.
All righty. Okay, next on the agenda, unless we have Zach or Jim on the phone yet, Keith?
I've not heard from them.
Okay, we'll move on to the discussion of position changes approved with the 2021 budget. Would you please carry on, Keith?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, this agenda item had been brought before the board earlier, and so we're revisiting that from a prior meeting. It is a resolution to formalize recognition of those positions that were approved in the 2021 budget during our budget hearings and budget process of adoption last fall. And so my request to the board, after having some discussion in prior meetings and so forth, recognizing that there is a majority of the board that would prefer to we.
Excuse me, Keith?
Yes, sir.
This is Commissioner Peck. I apologize for the interruption, but somebody needs to mute their speaker. I'm not able to hear half of what you're saying.
If we could request everybody who's not speaking to mute their device, it helps with the feedback, and thank you. Zach, is that you?
Oh, yes, yeah, Zach is here. Sorry for the late entry. The one of the call-in numbers I had wasn't working, so I had to use the other.
Okay. Please stand by for just a moment, if you would. Commissioner Didier, would you prefer to go back to the legislative update, or do you want me to continue with the budget item?
No, let's finish with the budget item. I just asked Zach to please mute your speaker so we can finish this topic, and then we'll be right with you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, so the item before you, as I said, is a resolution to adopt or recognize those positions that were adopted in the 2021 budget. We have a policy of formalizing that through this resolution process. My request, I recognize that there is a hesitancy at this point based on COVID requirements and the impact to the local businesses to grow government any more than we have to. So my recommendation to the board is to approve this resolution, but also perhaps through a second motion, formally request or order that we do not fill the position in the administrator's office or in the appraiser's office until such time as the county is opened back up again and businesses are fully able to operate. I think I would like at least some form of a recommended time frame on that second motion to relook at this perhaps in March or April and see where we are as a county, see what progress we've been able to make in terms of opening up local businesses, and then bring that item back before the board for consideration to go ahead and fill those then 2 vacant positions. But we recognize that despite the fact that many of our businesses are shut down, the expectations and the requirements of government have not changed and continue to be onerous on some of our staff people to get everything done in a timely way. So I'm not backing away from the necessity of these positions, but recognizing the reality that many employees are without a paycheck, many businesses are having to cut back and make changes, and the will of the board to consistently or comparatively restrict the growth of government is certainly a value that we all share. So bottom line is I'm asking for your approval of this resolution, and then a second motion to keep those 2 positions, one in the appraiser's office and one in administration, to keep those positions vacant until further review by the board.
Thank you, Keith. I believe we could do this with a motion and an amendment. So is there a motion on the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
think it'd be appropriate that we have some discussion before we start pitching for motions. I do not concur with the recommendation from Mr. Johnson. Noble as it might be, there is a certain irony in the fact that we are all yearning for the day when businesses can open and people can be employed. We have an opportunity to put some people in our county in employment. And it seems to me that while I understand the symbolism involved, if our objective is to get people to work, earning paychecks and supporting their families, why would we pass up a legitimate opportunity to do that for a couple of folks simply because they happen to work in public service, in this case, for the county? We opted not to take the lawful 1% increase in our property tax. We reduced the road shift, and our revenues and our projections are very healthy, especially due to growth in our county. So the county is well positioned financially to accommodate these positions. We've had previous discussion where we determined that these people are needed in county government to serve the people, and we can put at least a few more people to work, earning a paycheck and feeding their family. All of those things seem to me to be appropriate objectives. And again, the symbolism is not lost on me, but I would rather see somebody working and earning a paycheck and feeding their family than holding up symbolism. And I think they would too. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen, do you have any discussion?
Yes, first I would like to say thank you for everyone that reached out with their concerns. I think we need more input and sharing the concerns from the electeds and the community. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you for reaching out. We are the stewards of the county funds, and you know, the government doesn't have any money what it first doesn't collect from its constituents in the form of taxes. So I believe we must be diligent in our spending of it. I mean, our government is here to provide security for its residents and infrastructures to accommodate safe travel and commerce for the community as a whole. The county, you know, is in good financial standings, but we're still moving funds away from public works with the road shift, thus taking funds away from our infrastructure that is in need of repair. And I believe we should be doing more employee performance reviews, making sure that we are working as efficiently as possible before creating any new positions in the courthouse. And I believe that helps the community as a whole. And it's helpful for all of its constituents. It's not just necessarily adding one or two more jobs. We have the responsibility to make sure that we spend the taxpayers' money correctly and efficiently. So, but that's my opinion. So I do appreciate everybody reaching out with their own. I think we need more of that. So thank you.
So this is Commissioner Peck. I certainly understand the positions expressed by my fellow commissioner. I would point out that a process was held during the budget to look at what the county can reasonably afford and what positions were necessary to keep up with the demands of the fastest growing county in the state. I fear, and I have seen firsthand, that when we don't take care of the folks that work for the people in the courthouse, we lose them. They go to other counties, they go to other opportunities, and we will find the same situation here. You may not recall several years ago, you weren't here at the time, but we had a revolving door with our young law enforcement and corrections officers. They would come in, we would spend a fair amount of money, we would train them, they would work overtime, and pretty soon they would figure out that there were other counties and other places where they would get treated and taken care of better. And it's the marketplace that drives that. With respect to the road shift, we will forever be in that situation unless and until the state of Washington begins to pay its fair share of the expenses for work that they have mandated on us. So to cut off one hand to hold up the other in this case is not going to be productive. Not filling these positions is not going to improve the road shift situation at all. If you look at the cost of repairing even a quarter of a mile or re-graveling a quarter mile of road, the numbers in that arena are so large that these positions, which I believe are very much needed, are fiscally speaking, dollars and cents, are inconsequential in terms of the potential impact on the road budget by not filling these. So it's not in my heart at all to grow the size of government. And I've said that for as long as I've been here, but it's also not my desire to abuse our employees and expect them to do more than is a reasonable day's work to keep up with the workload, again, of the fastest growing county in the state. Thank you.
So my thought process is through this emergency proclamation of the governor, no government entity, be it city, county, state, or federal, has to date appeared to suffer any kind of similar financial setback or penalty because of the emergency. Now, we're not saying we're going to eliminate these. We're just going to freeze them until the economy is up and running and our businesses are open and the schools are open. I don't think that's asking too much when so many of our constituents have not only had to curtail their hiring, but they've had to lay off some people. And then there's far too many that have been faced with the prospect of going out of business altogether. That's our tax base. And for this simple little gesture to freeze these hiring positions until our county is up and running and our schools are open is not too much to ask. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the resolution as presented to us with the understanding that the person who got laid off from their job yesterday could be working for the county tomorrow.
Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Mullen. We are talking about only stopping the hiring of the two new positions in the assessor's office and the administrator's office. Is that correct? But the other positions in law enforcement that they've already started the process with, they will be put into place. That's not creating new positions. It's simply filling the.
Commissioner,
Yes.
if I may just offer a point of clarity.
Go ahead, Keith. Keith, you got the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, just for a point of clarity.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I've got a motion on the floor. It's not appropriate for discussion. If you need clarification on
I have asked for a second. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Keith, you got the floor.
Okay. The motion that I would prefer, or I think it would make the most sense, is to first deal with the resolution that's before you, 2021-018, and then any restrictions that you want to place on hiring processes be a second motion. I think that keeps it.
And that would be the motion I made.
There was no second on that motion. Do I hear a new motion?
Yeah, I repeat my previous motion. Approve the resolution as presented.
Do I hear a second? I would like to amend the motion. And I'd like to amend the motion that the appraiser position number 2 and the budget policy analyst would be frozen until our county is open and the schools are open. Do I hear a second?
I second it.
Okay.
Mr. Mullen.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion. I seconded the motion. Mr. Mullen seconded the amendment. Discussion.
So this is Commissioner Peck. I would like to know from HR and Mr. Johnson whether or not the amendment contradicts, violates, runs afoul, use whatever term you want, the decision and action already taken by the Board of Commissioners when the budget was adopted. And because of the fiscal note attached to this, if this requires reopening the budget. It is a change to the expenditure plan, and it's a change to an action already taken months ago by a board. Keith?
Yes, the way I stated my preference for the motions was to avoid the necessity of having to reopen the budget. Doing so requires public hearings, which we have already done. It requires, it would impact the levy rates established through the assessor's office, and it just creates some complications that I think are, and my advice to you is that that is unnecessary. But the board always holds the authority to withhold the offering of employment, even though those positions have been approved in the existing budget. And so that was the reason that I presented it the way I did.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I can support the proposed amendment to the motion.
Further discussion, Rocky, or Mr. Mullen? Commissioner Mullen?
No further discussion. It's just that we are putting the assessors and the administrator's office on hold until further notice. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
No further discussion.
All in favor of the amendment to the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All in favor of the motion to pass resolution 2021-018, say aye.
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 I'm hearing that as presented. Aye.
With that, Keith, we're ready for Mr. Potts.
Okay, thank you. Jim and Zach, you have the floor here now, if you're still on, I hope.
Yep, we're still here. Well, I'm still here. You got Zach, and thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time. I do apologize about being a couple minutes late there. The dial-in system kept hanging up on me, so I got her figured out. Being that we're a little on a truncated timetable here, I'll start right in. Commissioner Didier, you asked a couple of questions at the end of our call last time. One of the ones you asked was about the proclamations that the governor is putting forth for closing the state, and the restrictions you asked specifically are the Four Corners signing those proclamations. And the answer to your question is no. The Four Corners, none of them have signed any of the proclamations. The other component to that is kind of an addition to, on the 23 proclamations that were voted on, they went out on party lines. The other question that you wanted me to kind of follow up on was specifically legislation talking about your guys' ability to budget. And there are a couple hearings. I did include them in my email to you this week. There are two hearings, specifically one here this afternoon that's going to be really important. And I'm sure your treasurers are watching it. It's in House Finance at 1:30 p.m. today. And the bill number is 1332, and is concerning concerning property tax deferral during the COVID-19 pandemic. And basically what it does is it allows for, upon the request of a citizen, a property owner, through a predetermined process, there's an application process and all this, to defer their property taxes through October of this year. That particular bill becomes a little bit problematic for your treasurers and your revenue collection, specifically that, you know, your bond payments are due June, July, and if you can't collect enough revenue to pay your bond payments until October, there is a deficit, and there's no provisions in the bill, nothing from the state or the Fed that would allow you to be in compliance with that budget. So that is a pretty big deal right now in terms of how we're really handling legislation. They're not hearing a lot of bills, and the ones they are hearing, you know, they're in committee, and there's not a lot of discussion. For example, last week they had Senate Bill 5114, which was reopening Washington State, basically taking us to phase 2 at 25% open. Senator Hunt did not plan on having as much community participation as he did. There were well over 1,000 people who signed in support and to testify for the bill. It was problematic in the actual execution of the committee hearing, because how do you let 1,000 people testify? So what they did is they just set the testimony time to 1 minute and let people, as many as they could, talk. I think the citizens that spoke did a very, very fantastic job. The business owners did a great job. If you have the opportunity, I would recommend you jump on TVW and watch that hearing. It's a little bit long and can be dry, but the testimony, a lot of these business owners did a very good job. They made some very good points, one of which I can illustrate, and I'd like to point out. In terms of the governor's plan here, moving from phase 1 to phase 2 would require a 10% reduction in cases and hospitalizations from week to week. But what it doesn't talk about is, what if you have a 9% reduction, for example, times 5 weeks? Now you've had a 45% reduction in total cases and everything presented, and you're almost at 50% of what you were, but the state still doesn't open. You still don't get to, by the regionalization move, to phase 2. So that was a really big hole in the governor's proposal that was, they shed some light on, that I think was really important. On top of those ones, there is a House transportation budget. There have been hearings on that. There's some revenue streams in there that the counties haven't had access to in a really long time, which is a good thing. Senator Hobbs and Representative Fye have been working pretty closely for the Senate and House transportation budgets. However, Senator Hobbs does have a knack sometimes for working closely with, whoever it is in the House, and then going and doing his own thing. So we're going to have to watch that Senate transportation budget pretty closely. Two other bills that are definitely something that we're watching out for, and these are around public health, specifically regionalization. We've got 1152 and 1110. And really, this is the regionalized public health districts. And then talking about also with 1110 is talking about your local health district. And it basically expands the Board of Health on the local level, and would require, in a lot of the rural areas, you're going to have trouble getting people to sit on the board and then getting people to show up to the meetings. So we're making those comments on that one. But 1152 would be the regional health districts, and I know that we've talked about that before. And nobody wants to be in a situation where you have an appointed individual who is really directing your health policy within a district that is not specific to your constituents. So that argument, and we are making note of that as much as we possibly can with every legislator who will listen. The other component that I know you guys are always very interested in is any firearms legislation. There was a bill here that heard yesterday, 5078, regarding high-capacity magazines. Kind of same old story. This one was, you can have them, but you can't buy them anymore. You can't trade them. You can't go out with them. You can't do all that. Based on the circuit court ruling down in California, the bill really doesn't have much standing and probably isn't going to go anywhere. Will get struck down as it is. But there is a list of other firearms legislation that is out there. I will be sending that out in an email to you guys this afternoon. Many of these bills probably won't be heard, but we will make sure that you're aware of them, and when they come up, we'll make sure we get your comments in. And I see I do have to move on to the next meeting. I would be happy to follow up with you guys. If you have any questions via email or phone later on, or individually if you have any questions. But in closing, do you have anything right on the top of your list that you'd like to mention?
Yes, I do. Looking at this Monday, there was a 50-51 concerning state oversight and accountability on peace officers and correction officers. What happened there?
They heard the bill. I don't know if they moved it to executive session yet. I can pull that up really quick for you. The state police and fire associations, not fire associations, but the sheriff and police are doing a fantastic job, specifically in trying to get out in front of a lot of this legislation. And so, okay, so they did exec that bill, and it's moved on to Ways and Means. And in terms of bills moving past Ways and Means and appropriations this year, it's going to be very difficult. So a lot of these bills will be able to address with financial concerns. But what I was saying about the fire, the police and sheriffs is they're working very diligently on a local, state, and national level to get out in front of the defund the police movement and anything that's coming in terms of criminal justice reform. And they're doing a wonderful job themselves at providing solutions. So they're not just stuck with whatever the legislatures decide.
I'd just like to say very good job on presenting this to us today. And there's one other here that's hearing today is 5122 juvenile court jurisdiction. We're now going to make a juvenile 19 years of age.
Correct. That one is, they're hearing that today. That also, not only does it make a juvenile 19 years of age, it raises the age at which a crime can be committed from 8 years old to 13 years old. Yeah. There's a lot of issues with this bill. There's a lot of opposition to that bill. And one of the things in terms of a financial impact on the local level and to the judicial system here is there's something like 1,700 inmates currently in adult penitentiaries who would have to be moved down to juvenile facilities. So there's just some logistic issues with that as well. We are watching it very closely and opposed to it.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other commissioners have questions?
Back, this is Commissioner Peck. I've got about a dozen questions, but you've got another meeting. I'll call you later.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Zach.
Have a good day.
Okay, with that, Keith, we're down to public comment. Is there anybody on the phone or any emails to read?
I have one caller on the phone, and I do have one written submission.
Okay, proceed as you will.
All right, go ahead. Shirley, if you'd go ahead and connect the phone speaker. There's a slight communication delay. We're going to appreciate your patience. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning. Part of my concern in calling in this morning is the two bills that he just mentioned. He didn't give you bill numbers, 5134 and 5055 regarding civil service. In 5134, there are 10 new sections. There was about almost 2 hours of testimony on January 14th, and I have requested that those be brought to the Civil Service Commissioners meeting for us to review and look at. I think it is a drastic change to our positions, requirements, and direction. It almost feels like it's commandeering of civil service, but it does need review. And so those are the two bills that we are going to be pursuing. I'm also on hold if you have any questions or concerns regarding reappointing me as your Franklin County Civil Service Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. I do have a second caller now on the line.
Okay, Keith, go ahead.
Is this Erica?
Yes,
Good morning, Erica. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
thank you very much. I was just calling in regarding redistricting. I saw that was going to be on the agenda later on today. And I understand that there's been some controversy in the past regarding redistricting our county. And so I was just calling in to suggest that we have a committee that would propose one or several plans for how the redistricting should be done. I don't believe that should be done by the commissioners themselves because I believe that it's somewhat of a conflict of interest. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do have a written submission that I'd read at this time.
Please, go ahead, Keith.
Comes
Read
to
it.
us from Todd Harris, a Franklin County resident. I would like to prompt all three commissioners to view a recently released program by frontline doctors and listen to what doctors are going through with regard to the Wuhan virus. This program gives us information that our own local media is keeping from us, information on therapeutics and their use, the lies being told about the therapeutics, and the false studies promoted for news, but then having to be retracted because they were fake studies. It describes death rates in various countries and discusses the mask mandates. It provides ample information on the experimental vaccine being pushed on high-risk populations and how it should not be taken by almost all of us. The mRNA experimental vaccine is new technology and should be tested completely before being put into the general population. You can view this talk at info@aflds.com. I would like also to ask that the Franklin County audit its voting machine used in the 2020 election. Though many are very confident we had an honest election, there are several issues that gubernatorial candidate Lauren Culp has brought up, and throughout this country, there has been enough evidence brought forth that leaves confidence waning in Dominion voting machines. Do you want to return to having trust in our local elections and have a high level of participation? Then audit the voting machine used in Franklin County. If we do it, perhaps other counties will see fit to do the same, bringing transparency and truth back into our elections. Finally, I would like the commissioners to do everything in their power to open up our schools. The continuance of school closures serves no one. The death rate for young people up to 20 is not zero, but near zero. The problem is teachers are fearful. Why would these teachers be fearful when their survival rate is above 99.8% up to 50 years of age? I would ask that the school boards start replacing scared teachers with teachers who are healthy and capable both mentally and physically. If you don't open up the schools, start sending the tax money you are collecting for teaching back to the taxpayers. What school officials have done to a generation of young people since finding out the Wuhan virus is not so bad for the young is unforgivable. Franklin County must find a way to resist unconstitutional edicts from Governor Inslee and open our county back up for business. Todd Harris, Franklin County.
Okay, Keith, is that it?
Yes, that's all of the public comment at this time.
Okay, we're down to office business. I do believe we have two warrants here. This is Commissioner Mullen. Have you got those in front of you?
Yes, I move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $574,967.19 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the Auditor's Office and the County Administrator.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, we have, I say we make a motion, we move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $995,723.75 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the Auditor's Office.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. With that, Keith, we're down to the consent agenda with 3 items. I need a motion.
I make a motion that we pass the 3 items on the consent agenda.
Second.
And I would like discussion on item 1. So with that, Keith, for the good of the board and the people listening in, would you please enlighten everybody what the County Civil Service Commission is responsible for and their duties?
Yes, the Civil Service Commission primarily is responsible for maintaining hiring lists for law enforcement. I've noted that Michelle Andrus is on hold on the phone if anybody has questions specifically for her, since it addresses her reappointment to the commission. But they work. The commission works closely with our HR department to recruit and advise and maintain those lists, so that if and when law enforcement hirings need to take place, it's the Civil Service Commission that does the testing, initial testing, and review of qualifications of those individuals. Carly's on the phone. She may wish to add anything that I may have missed. There's probably functions that I did not spell out, but that's essentially their core function.
So Keith, how many members are on that board?
I'm going to defer to Carly, but I believe there are 3.
That's correct. There are 3 members of the commission as set by statute.
Okay, I'm just trying to refresh my memory, but also help the new commissioner on what these commissions are and what they do. So, Carly, do you have anything more to add?
No, I think he's covered the general. I mean, there's certainly some other things. We've got a whole web page, and certainly, HR can provide additional information if there's questions. But the basic function of the Civil Service Commission is to help provide equity in the hiring process for positions within the commission positions within the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, as set very clearly laid out in statutory requirements.
Okay. Commissioners, anything to add? Okay, with that, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, Keith, moving on to administrative office business.
Yes, the first item, the issue of redistricting has come up recently. I think you're all aware that we have received a notice from an organization that's challenged our current districting system and the current maps of the districts. This is an item that we've discussed multiple times over the past few years. There has been an expressed desire to create a redistricting committee or commission for Franklin County. In reviewing this matter with the prosecuting attorney's office, I would note that there is no current structure in state law that either requires or even spells out how such a committee or commission would function. So it would be a creation of this board to make such a committee effective, and what the rules for who gets appointed, how many members, all of those things would have to be decided by this board. And then once that committee is established, they've had a chance to meet and offer up proposed plans, they would not have the authority to approve those plans. Those plans would have to come back before this board, and then the Board of Commissioners would select a map or a plan that had been submitted for final approval. Because we have been challenged about our current system, it would be my recommendation that the prosecuting attorney's office and our outside attorney that we have retained with expertise in both the federal and state Voting Rights Act, it would be my recommendation that we have an executive session discussion before we make any formal plans towards a redistricting committee or commission. So because it was an item that had been brought about at the request of commissioners, wanted to have that brief discussion today on kind of what your preference is for directing me going forward with that possibility of trying to establish a committee or commission.
Commissioners, discussion?
This is
I have some
Commissioner Mullen.
comments that I'll defer to Commissioner Mullen.
I believe we should move forward with the forming of a commission to set the redistricting boundaries.
Okay, Commissioner Pack?
So I have been speaking often directly from the RCWs about redistricting in Franklin County since at least 2017. To condense those comments, I'll say that I have cautioned that the Washington Voting Rights Act was coming, and if we didn't get our districts in line, it would be done for us. I have cautioned that if we didn't take it seriously, we would find ourselves with a complaint and a lawsuit, just like the city of Pasco experienced. That has come to pass. Our time, our window, our opportunity to create a commission that isn't even currently authorized in state statute is, in my view, not a viable option. That should not be confused with I'm opposed to it. I'm just telling you that I don't think that option still exists. I think it's been taken off of the table by board inaction. We've got a pending lawsuit. We didn't resolve it by January 15th. We were given 180 days from back in October when they sent us our letter. And January 15th was a key date for resolution. And I'm happy to go on the record, not because I like the outcome, but because I want people to know that I think there is a lawsuit coming our way. I think this matter is going to be decided in the court if we don't come to terms with the people who are alleging an unfair practice. None of this should be a surprise to anybody. It's exactly the same path that Pasco had to go down. The statutes say that our districts should be as compact as possible and that they should be as equally divided as possible. Ours are neither, and they haven't been for years. And it's been pointed out on the record in public meetings. So we are not in a position to negotiate. We're not in a position to tell people hold off on a lawsuit until we figure out how to form a salary commission and go down that road. I will be a team player if that's the way the board wants to go. But I would encourage everyone to review the history of this subject because it's all through our board meeting minutes. We would be in a much better position if we were doing this 3 years ago. I fear that that opportunity no longer exists. I almost hope I'm wrong about that, because I do think that having local input to it is valuable, but it doesn't change the fact that it still has to meet the state RCW requirements. And no matter who comes up with a plan, if it doesn't meet those requirements, we will find ourselves in court, and the courts will decide for us. And my opinion, they will likely order new elections. No surprise there. It's exactly what happened with Pasco. And lastly, I'll just say that it was 2-3 years ago now when I said, if we don't get our arms around this and deal with it, we're going to find ourselves in court. And sure enough, here we are. And one other quick thing I want to make sure people understand. The laws have changed since we missed our opportunity a couple of years ago to do this. Now we're in a position where district-only elections are not only lawful. I think district-only elections for our county for commissioners is going to be a requirement. I don't see us escaping that. So everybody, please keep that in mind, and thanks for giving me so much time.
Okay, so this morning I went on the RCWs, and I encourage everyone to do that. And after reviewing all the RCWs, I find no prohibition as to our authority to compose a committee to initially evaluate and propose for our consideration a change to precinct boundaries. And I think this needs to be done, and we need to move immediately on this. And I proposed to Keith that one option would be what they use for salary commissions for commissioners. That is, the auditor picks 6 people randomly, and each commissioner gets to put one person on the board from 9 members. And we remove ourselves from any appearance of gerrymandering this thing, because after viewing some of the maps that were drawn up the last few years, I would say they were suspect to privilege of the commissioners, and I want to remove that from our ability, or even the appearance thereof. So I think we should start immediately on this, to start this commission in that same manner, and that is up for discussion, how many members the commissioners would like on it, and how we select those people. And I think that we cannot select any more than one each, and let the auditor's office pick 6 people randomly from the community of Franklin County.
So this is Commissioner Peck. The auditor is an elected official who has a personal stake in the process, unlike a broad salary commission. So you'd have to vet that process. I would not be comfortable creating a commission out of whole cloth, regardless of its scope or mission or purpose, without having run it through our legal counsel and probably running it by the state, just to make sure that we aren't going to go through all the effort just to have it slapped down by a plaintiff or by the courts or by the state. In other words, we need to do a little bit of due diligence. Not opposed to the concept, but I don't think we just spend a little time reading the statutes and then wing it. This is how we're going to create it. There's too much at stake. The consequences and the costs, the implications, especially when we're under threat of lawsuit now. I think that's an ill-advised course without getting some serious legal review first. And if the legal review shows a clear path, then, as I've already said, I'm willing to be a team player and go down that path. I would just caution that no matter what we do or who does it, us, the board, salary commission, whomever, if it doesn't meet the statutory requirements of the RCW, we will find ourselves challenged and back in court. So we best get it right and make sure it complies with the RCWs. And with respect to the comment about the district maps drawn previously, they were done by a number of people. I certainly participated. The auditor participated. Other commissioners participated. And all of them were presented as options. I'm not aware of any of them that gerrymandered, which is the correct pronunciation. And in fact, the only one, if there's one that even hints at it, would be one that was drawn to stretch the district over in East Pasco up the PK Highway to accommodate Mr. Mullen, who had previously run for office. So you're right. If there's one that maybe had a hint of gerrymandering, it would have been that one. Thank you.
This Commissioner Mullen, who wrote that plan that went out to PK Highway?
I don't know who wrote it. I was willing to accommodate it, given that we had, prior to the process, an individual had already expressed running and had already invested in the campaign previously, and I thought that it could be done and still be sufficiently compliant with the RCW that we probably wouldn't endure a lawsuit over it. But it wasn't. It was an accommodation and a compromise.
Commissioner, if I may just interrupt briefly, this is Keith. I had a hand in helping draft those prior proposed maps in consultation with the PA's office and other resources. But there was not a specific person that wrote those plans.
Thank you, Keith. With that, Jennifer, have you got anything to add here? How long would it take you to look over that proposal to see if we're within the guidelines?
To work with our attorney, John Safarli, on this. I know, and I can't recall the exact requirements, but once we were given that 180-day notice, there were requirements that we were required to follow. We can't just go redistrict right now from my recollection. So I really think we need to work with Mr. Safarli to make sure correctly. I'd hate to waste everyone's time and county resources and money redistrict to find out we can't.
Your mic must not be working 100% of the time. I'm losing some words there, and I don't know if any other people are having the same problem, but I got the gist of what you said, so I would suggest that you check with John and see if that's okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may offer a suggestion here that we convene a session with outside counsel and the PA's office, perhaps at our next board meeting, to discuss an executive session, what legal strategies we would have to make sure that we're compliant with the law and meeting the expectations of the commissioners to have a fair division of districts.
Okay, I think that would be good. Now, I don't believe the census report's going to come out until later this spring, so we need to be as efficient with our time as possible. So if you could check with him at your earliest convenience, I would like to get started on this process. We
can accommodate that, I believe.
And for clarification, when I Google gerrymandering, GERRYMANDERING, it is stating there that this is a practice intended to establish an unfair political advantage for a particular party. So it is GERRY, so everybody knows it's gerrymandering. Thank you.
But Mr. Chairman, you might do a little more research. It's named for the governor of Massachusetts, Governor Gary, who drew the famous Salamander district to advantage himself in re-elections. Yes, you're right. A lot of people pronounce it gerrymander. It's named for Governor Gary. I encourage you to research that.
So with that, is there any more discussion on redistricting? Okay, so Keith, the next item on your list?
Yes, sir. Last week, we had a caller who's requested some assistance with the traffic slowing on his section of Warnett Road. I've asked Matt Mahoney and Craig to be here with us today to respond to specific questions, but to summarize, they have done some traffic studies of traffic volumes on that section of road. At the request of the board, they installed speed signs that show how fast a car is going, with the encouragement to slow down during that section of road. They've, as I said, have done traffic studies to show that, in fact, those signs have been effective in reducing the average speed on that section of road. And because it was the direction of the board to the Public Works Department to install those traffic signals, Mr. Mahoney says that it would be outside of the scope of his authority to remove those on his own decision, but would prefer that the board direct him to do so if that's the direction that the board wants to take. We recognize that there are many sections of county roads that speed can be a problem and put public safety at risk. We recognize that law enforcement has limited capacity to monitor each section of county road where speeding might take place, and it's up to the sheriff's office to determine where their resources are best utilized and are most needed. But I wanted to make sure that our public works folks were available to answer specific questions that the board may have. And if the board prefers to direct them in a different way than what we have been doing, that would be an opportunity to do so. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to jump in and add any substantive background information that I may not have covered.
Mr. Miho did reach out to me. I did have a conversation with him. He did request that we remove the sign the signs that we were directed to put in by the board. And also he wanted us to consider putting in, sitting back in about 2017, that went through 2018 and prompted the board to direct us to put in the digital speed signs that we have now. So with that, I'll just remain silent for any questions.
Matt, this is Chairman Didier talking, and I put this out, our agenda out on Facebook, and I've had a couple people inquire about that, and it's getting to be quite a concern, not only with Hornet Road, but other roads. So my question is this: I've looked up, Global Industries creates a 10 to 15 mile an hour portable table is what they call it. And it's only $89. Could we possibly purchase the road department, maybe 6 or 8 of these, and you could temporarily put them there? Because once you program someone's mind that that's there, they will slow down.
I mean, definitely portables would be more would be more acceptable from my standpoint. Be easily removed and moved elsewhere, as opposed to putting in something permanent. I will tell you that we've done a lot of research on speed tables and speed humps, and you see them in a crosswalk capacity on Court Street, right in front of the courthouse and in front of the hospital there on 4th Avenue. And those are great spots for them because those are raised crosswalks. And when you start using them in communities, they can also have a very negative effect. Where we've actually have heard where other property owners and residents started a horn honking campaign, which disturbed neighbors. So the portables is that you would want to get public buy-in. It should be a public process where the community, that is something they want, because it can have some very adverse negative effects. The other thing is you can put out even the trailers with the speed signs, and they'll have a very short-term effect. People will slow down while they're out there. That will last a couple of weeks. And then everybody after that is back up and going the speeds that they choose to drive, unfortunately. So yes, we've done a lot of research and found a lot of things that will have good temporary effects. What we put in out there is this is somewhat permanent. They are speed limit signs that have the digital reader boards on them that display the speeds that people are going. And from our from our stance, of course, we need to conduct another in that area. Unfortunately, we were unable to do that in 2020 as scheduled, but we're hoping to get that done. We do that through Ben Franklin County of our Council of Governments. They do that on behalf of all of the agencies within the metropolitan planning area, and so we're hoping that we can get them fired up and get out and do the traffic counts and speed studies on all of our roads, including Pasco and Kennewick and Richland and Benton County. So that's our hope this year, and I think that we'll know a heck of a lot more about whether those signs that were used that have more of a long-term effect than some of the other things, which are very temporary. I'm not debating that speed tables and speed humps. I would absolutely be opposed to speed bumps. Speed bumps are what we see in parking lots out on the road. Those aren't typically used. That's why we're seeing speed humps and speed tables are taking the place. Those, I'm not debating that they do slow down traffic. What we're saying is that they also have some other major effects where people will pick up their speed in between them, where they're actually going faster. Like I said, the horn honking that we had in a neighboring county where they were prompted after they made the expenditure then to go out and increase that expenditure by then having to remove them. So there's a lot of things we can do. It is a countywide issue. Unfortunately, it's just a nationwide issue. People are just driving way too fast, and everything about that road, I think the county engineer puts it best. Everything out that road tells people to drive slow, and that's not the only road in what I still refer to as the Riverview area. Forgive me, it's just how long I've worked for Franklin County. People now call them the donut holes, but in the Riverview area, I try to provide the board with information on those segments of road that are on both sides of it. And you can see that there's a huge difference between the segment of road that we're talking about and the segments that are on either side of the segment. The speeds are much higher on the adjacent segments than they are on this segment. So we can definitely see that what we have done has made a difference. So I'm whatever the board directs us to do, we can certainly do, and we're willing to try. I will just say that it might be best if you're interested in looking at even portable speed tables or speed humps, that we provide you with some information that shows the pros and cons of those, whether they be permanent or portable. So.
Can you give me the cost difference between the two? What's a permanent one cost? And I've outlaid that a 10 to 15 mile an hour speed bump is $89.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, when you're talking about traffic calming, I mean, you can see the cost from something like that going all the way up to, you can see it in the, up to $10,000 or more a fix. Craig can probably answer those cost questions better than I can, but certainly, the only thing I would say is I have seen those. I've seen the the studies that are put out by the manufacturers of those, and certainly I can see where they would, certainly we see where they work. I'm not, like I said, I believe that speed tables and speed humps work. It's just, I think this board needs to weigh the pros and cons of that, even if they are temporary in nature, because they can have some adverse effects in a totally opposite direction. So
Matt, this is Commissioner Peck. A couple of quick questions. One, are the signs that we have up now making a meaningful difference? Is there an improvement? If so, speak to that. Question two, are there liability concerns associated with putting out temporary speed bumps, speed humps, whatever you want to call them? And aren't there associated signage costs necessary for that? And we'll just maybe start with the second question, then go back to the effectiveness of the signs.
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen is we've seen many communities throughout the nation. California is a good example. I can't recall, but that's certainly something I can provide to the board. I still have that information. A community in California was sued. A individual was going over one of them. The signs, it was just one of those things. You have to have the signs up before on both sides, notifying people of the bump. One of the signs got covered with kind of a light snow. The person didn't see it. The person was critically injured going over one of those things. The community was sued and lost at court. And so that's kind of the other side of that thing, is that yes, there's additional costs, there's additional maintenance, and certainly when we get into certain weather, then that's going to take even more effort for our individuals to go out and make sure, because when you got snow on the ground, those may not be visible. Somebody goes over them even at 25, 30 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour zone, and bad things can happen to them inside the vehicle or the vehicle itself. And so, yeah, those are kind of the cons, some of the cons that we look at. Emergency vehicles, going over them, we've seen where it actually increases the time that emergency vehicles get to locations, because they will actually, what the studies show is they'll actually try to miss all of those types of things. So they'll go around them, which then can increase their time to and from a residence. Or if they have no choice but to go over them, certainly they have to go over them slow, and then you've got somebody who could be critically injured in the back of that vehicle that can cause some issues. And so, like I said, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm just pointing out some of the information and guidance that we have read when we did our extensive study of this back in 2017 through 2018. So, are they effective in slowing people down? Yes, they are. But like I said, the board needs to be fully aware, if that's the direction they want to go, on what they can expect in some other areas. So hopefully that answers question 2. Question 1 is, yes, we need to do another traffic study, a more recent traffic study, but what we did before and after shows a significant decrease in the speed on that segment of road, to the point now where it was, I think we saw in one respect the 85th percentile, which is what we shoot for in kind of the transportation engineering side, is what are 85% of the traveling public driving in an area. You always know there's going to be people that are going to drive way slower, and there's going to be a few that are going to speed. But 85th percentile is a huge number for us, and we saw a significant drop to where it is pretty close to the posted speed in that area. So that's significant on any road to see that type of decrease, where you're seeing a 5 to 7 mile per hour decrease in the 85th percentile. So the numbers, the data we have shows that it has made a significant improvement and difference for that road. And I think that I believe that when we do our next traffic study, that we'll have more information, and we'll be able to really determine and see if that effect is long-term, or whether it was just a short-term effect. So that's why my recommendation is that we engage in that process and evaluate the data when it comes in, and then go from there.
Commissioner Mullen?
Yes, Matt, in your opinion, if you lived on that street, what is the most effective way to slow that traffic down?
Well, always a law enforcement presence helps. I know even on the street I live on that I kind of root for people to get pulled over when I see a cop. when I see a city cop sitting on my road as I pass by, because I live in a very similar situation. I live in a subdivision, and people, it's 25 miles an hour, and you know darn well that people don't drive that speed, and so enforcement is a huge factor. Some people, for most people, it's just a reminder. Putting out signs sometimes is we see them every day and we forget about. We're kind of doing our own thing, and next thing we know, we're kind of going faster than we should, and then we slow down. And so that's why a digital speed limit board is pretty effective, because it's something that grabs your attention, and then it kind of reminds people of what the speed is and that they're going too fast. And so it has a good effect from that standpoint. So, so anything we can do. I mean, we see even roundabouts in Kennewick, which aren't just traffic, control at intersections, but they're also part of what we call traffic calming, trying to slow people down. And we see people, we see fences off to the side all over in Kennewick that people have gone through because they're going too fast. So you can really put in all the different traffic calming devices and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for a section of road, and you can always have people that are gonna go too fast. So it's a hard thing to gauge. That's why we promoted this direction, because we feel that a majority of people just kind of lose track of where they're at, and that's a good reminder. And a majority of the people, once they see how fast they're going compared to the speed limit, they will slow down. And like I said, when we did our speed study, we saw pretty positive results. And I think that our next speed study here that we're gonna hopefully, because I will tell you, if the Council of Governments isn't able to get out and do this, because we try to do these roads every 2 years, our major and minor collectors within the planning area. If they're unable to get out this year, then we will engage in our own study of that to gain data this year. We don't want to go any longer than we have, and so I'll guarantee the board that if COG isn't going to be able to get out and do it, that we absolutely will do it ourselves and see where we're at.
Matt, maybe this isn't a question for you, but more Ms. Johnson, but being that we've got this much concern and these many people, and there's more than one that have called in and complained, God forbid if a kid gets hit or killed after all this we've been warned about, do we have legal liability then?
This is Sean. I would suggest we have this discussion separately and off the record.
Okay, with that, is there any more discussion on Warnett Road?
Oh, this is Sheriff Raymond. If I could make a comment.
Absolutely, Sheriff. Go ahead.
That's my neighborhood that we're talking about. And frankly, I have never seen a government entity give so much attention to really what is a block of roadway, that it gets way more attention than the rest of the donut hole streets and residential areas that are currently in the county. My perception is there's a growth problem. There's more and more houses and more cars being built in those neighborhoods. And I've experienced and got to watch it year from year, and the traffic counts, i.e. cars, are increasing daily, and you have residential areas that have a posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour, and the only way you can change that is by changing the speed limits in residential areas into a downward fashion. There's not enough infrastructure to build circles at the intersections or any of those type of things, and installing traffic control devices such as bumps in the roadways is only going to increase accidents and dangers by doing that. That's just my 2 cents. As much as we can put law enforcement attention into those neighborhoods, we will, but we don't have the ability to put constant law enforcement presence into that neighborhood on a daily basis.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anybody else would like to put input in this?
Mr. Mahoney, this is Commissioner Pack. I just want to ask, do we have any accident history or statistics on that stretch of road that would warrant it getting more attention than the dozens of other similar places in the county?
The accident history that we have is at the intersection of Wernette and 44. That was kind of highlighted in the report that Craig Erdman, county engineer, presented to the board. It was presented to the board back in 2017. And that's why I wanted to point out when I put my response together and that I sent to Keith Johnson was that used to be a two-way stop, meaning that people on 44 stopped and Wernette was the through road. It is a collector, and that was back in 2004 based on input that we were getting from Mr. Alamiro that was changed to a four-way stop in an attempt to, and the board directed our department back in 2004 to change that from the two-way stop to a four-way stop. So that is where we're seeing where we've seen any accidents. Exactly how many, I would have to defer to Craig Erdman. He may have that number off the top of his head, but as far as the road itself, Wernette between 44 and 48, we do not have any accident history. It's at the intersection of 44 and Wernette.
And that's not any different than any other similarly situated area in the county, to my knowledge. Would you agree?
I agree. That's a fair statement, yes.
Yes, this is Craig Erdman, the county engineer. There have been 3 accidents on that stretch of road. I think they all are at the intersection since 1990. All 3 were property damage only accidents.
I'm sorry, Craig, I didn't catch it. You said there were 3 since when?
1990.
So 30 years, 3 accidents, no injuries.
Yes, property damage only. I say that's probably fairly typical for a neighborhood such as that.
And just to follow up, Craig, you did say at the intersection of 44 and Wernette, not on this 1,300-foot segment between 44 and 40 at the intersection, correct?
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now to see collisions. Yeah, intersection related. One of them was not at the intersection. It seems to have been just a runoff. Was a hit and run, and that was alcohol related.
Okay. With that being said, is there any other discussion on Wernette Road? Hearing none, Keith, we'll move on to discussion on WebEx for commissioner meetings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had some questions, as you know, about the possibility of adding a video component to our commissioner meetings. And WebEx has been the suggested platform that we use to do so. We used WebEx during our budget hearings, and I know we had a couple of questions about the security of the platform and whether it was adequately secure, and in particular, a question about the use of the what's essentially called the chat function on the product during commissioner meetings, where one commissioner could have ex parte or independent conversations with another commissioner during that meeting through the use of the WebEx product. I've reviewed those matters with our IS department. A couple of those folks are on our line today if you have specific questions, but have reached an adequate conclusion that chat feature can be turned off by the administrator of the call, which presumably would be myself, and then it would work as a video component to our meetings, and not interfere with our ability to record and keep minutes for the meeting. The one request that the clerk to the board has made that I think is wise is if the board decides to want to go to WebEx and add that we begin that not next week, but the following week. I believe that's the 8th of February, the 9th of February. So it'd be 2 weeks from today before we launch that product live for our board meetings. So with that, we'll stand for any questions that you have.
Questions, commissioners?
Keith, Commissioner Peck, thanks for checking on the chat function. That's gotten other jurisdictions in hot water in the past, so I'm pleased to hear it can be turned off. The only other concern I had about WebEx was that, and I may be remembering this incorrectly, but I seem to recall IS last year expressing a concern about server security in the WebEx system. And it got extra attention recently when the Port of Kennewick had their servers hijacked and are now still being, to my knowledge, held ransom. So can you give us a green light, a thumbs up that you've talked with IS and any security concerns have been resolved? I'm hoping the answer is yes.
Yes, that is correct, Commissioner Peck.
Good. Okay, well, thanks. That's really the only two concerns I had.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
I feel we should be using it as long as it is secure and safe. So I am in agreement to move forward with the WebEx.
Okay.
There's one other thought, gentlemen, and that is that perhaps if people are not accustomed to using WebEx, and maybe you all are, but maybe scheduling a practice connection, not to conduct any business, just to test out the systems.
We can certainly provide any training and dry runs that you need to feel comfortable with using the product. It's not significantly different from Zoom or GoToMeeting or any of these other commercially available platforms in terms of user friendliness. So our IS group is more than happy to help train or make sure that you're comfortable with the product before we use it.
Yeah, and Keith, my concern was more about compatibility of hardware, but I think both are legitimate interests.
Yes, WebEx is a generally available product that's available on most standard internet services. So we'll be able to.
Yeah, some of us live on WebEx meetings and GoToMeeting and Team and all these different platforms, and it's not always as simple. Sometimes there are interference issues that we don't see. So I'm fine with WebEx. I think it'll work. I'm just maybe I'll just do a practice with you or something. I just don't want to get to a meeting and find a glitch we didn't foresee. That's all. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So Keith, with that, we could also still use the telephone if we so choose, or Is that going to be eliminated? It's WebEx only in case we have a problem.
No, that, the telephone communication is still available and we'll still have open lines for that. Yeah.
There you go. Okay.
Commissioner,
So with
I may just request that we do this by motion so that, we have that in the record.
I'm getting feedback. Okay, well, I was getting feedback there from, so is there a motion on the floor for approval of WebEx?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Peck. I think just consensus of the board is fine. I'm in, and I'm pretty sure you two are.
Commissioner Mullen?
Yes, I'm in agreement to move forward.
Okay, we have a consensus, then we will start WebEx on February 9th, the commissioner meetings.
Very
Okay,
good.
moving on, Keith, to unfinished business, canvassing board update. And I believe, Jeff Burgard is in on the phone call and is available to answer any questions.
Yeah, if I may, I think having Mr. Burkhardt on is very helpful, so I appreciate that. I think we're in a essential agreement. Some conversations have taken place since our last meeting. That's why this is on the unfinished business, as we discussed this before. And we received some legal guidance from the PA's office regarding this. So my suggestion is for me to find a evening meeting time where we could invite the public to participate virtually and hear all of the concerns or questions about how the Dominion voting machines work. That was the central question or discussion. There may be other questions regarding elections in Franklin County and needing assurance that they are in fact fair and complete. And so I'm looking at the calendar. We'll be working with the members of the canvassing board to put that meeting together.
And Keith, this is Sean. If I could just add to that, since we are trying to formulate a work group or a workshop of the canvassing board, that will require publication, as this is not on the scheduled list of meetings that was sent previously to our official news outlet, The Graphic. So we need to make sure that everybody is aware on the canvassing board. The deadline for that proposal is 3 o'clock on Mondays. And so just keep that in mind if we are going to set that workshop to convene after the board meeting on Tuesday. We just need to make sure we get that published and notified. I think Karen has been willing to facilitate that. We just need to give her the proposed language. I sent out to the other canvassing board members a proposal that addresses what I believe are the concerns. And I wanted to defer to our chairman of the canvassing board, which is the county auditor, for input or any notice goes out to be published. So anyway, I've sent that email out so the other members could look at that and consider that. And I guess, Keith, if you're helping to coordinate that, I'll defer that to you to provide that assistance for the canvassing board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is Mr. Beaton on the phone?
I am.
Okay, have you, hearing Mr. Sant, have you formulated a letter to put into the graphic for a workshop?
Well, like I said, I did speak with Karen yesterday, and then, Sean had sent out an email that had a good summary in it and was proposing a workshop, which is exactly what I think we need. So yeah, we will get that in the graphic by 3 o'clock next Monday, and then we'll go from there.
So that will be February 1st, and then we have to wait 10 days, correct, Keith?
Well, the deadline for submission to the graphic is such that it meets their Thursday publication date. So, and then you have to have the statutory period to open. So yes, the short answer is that's the purpose for how much time it takes is to get that published in the graphic.
So we won't be able to publish it in the graphic until February 10th or February 9th, or excuse me, it'd be
it will go in February 1st, so it'll be published on the 3rd.
but they have to have the information by Monday, and that was yesterday. So we won't make February 1st. It'll be the next meeting, which will be a February 8th, correct? Will be the first?
No, the graphic will receive it by February the 1st. It is published in their paper on February the 4th.
Okay. And then we got 10 days after that. So I'm just trying to figure out what meeting we're going to be able to discuss this. We need the public to know when this is going to happen, because there has been lots of dialogue on this about checking our voting machine.
Yeah. I'm not sure if a date for the workshop has been proposed yet.
Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on to discussion on prayer and moment of silence.
Yes, there also been some discussion about opening our Board of Commissioner meetings with some form of invocation or prayer or moment of silence. The Prosecuting Attorney's Office has done a fairly good in-depth legal review of what's permissible. That information has been sent to the commissioners. There are, as you know, some limitations to make sure that constitutional liberties are protected, both for those who want to have that time, as well as those who may have a different belief system, and make sure that there's adequate separation of church and state in all of our affairs. So my suggestion is to follow that guidance that we received from the Prosecuting Attorney's Office and open that period of time to a moment of silence. If you prefer to ask local ministers or religious leaders to participate in a prayer, more of a prayer type of situation, that's going to require some preparation and establishing some policies for who is invited to participate in that and how that's left open to protect as I said, those constitutional liberties that are important to all of us. So I don't have a particular personal view of the matter. That's not my role here. So I'm willing, or I guess more of just processing an opportunity for the board to discuss that issue.
Discussion, commissioners.
Yes, Commissioner Peck. I've given this considerable thought and a fair amount of research, and especially enjoyed revisiting the writings of Madison and Jefferson when they were writing the first set of state laws for Virginia, which later got woven into the First Amendment. And they make a very salient point. And in my view, this is entirely about individual liberty. And as a Christian, I enjoy my prayer time, and I'm not at all offended by Christian prayers in our board meetings. Although I do think that they violate the liberty of other citizens whom we are sworn to represent, if they have disparate views, especially widely disparate views. The military has attempted to overcome this by having open doors for chaplains to come in and give prayers, or by having chaplains representing a whole bunch of different faiths. And the state legislature has attempted the same. And in the case of the state legislature, probably one of the more illustrative examples of the challenges is when an openly self-described satanic group was denied the opportunity to come in and give an invocation in the legislature. And so they held satanic rituals on the steps of the Capitol, which then prompted a state representative to follow behind and pour holy oil on the steps to purify the site, which then escalated into the state issuing fines for property damage, and on and on. From a purely liberty standpoint, I don't know how we can justify using the people's time and building to give overtly Christian prayers when we have all sorts of other faiths. Pick any of the 12 major religions of the world, but just pick Islam, for example. If we're going to give openly Christian prayers, are we open to having someone come in who follows the Islamic faith and bring in prayer rugs and do the invocation? If we're open to let any and all have equal access, then to me that represents and defends liberty. But I think that's impractical. For us to have to tone down or dilute our own Christian beliefs and prayers to give an invocation that doesn't overtly offend anybody, in turn violates our own individual liberties by having to suppress our own true religious faiths and beliefs. And so really you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't, whichever way you go. And I think from a liberty standpoint, the appropriate path is to set aside a moment, maybe 30 seconds of silence, and encourage people to pray according to their faith or lack thereof, to their God or lack thereof, or for whatever is on their heart at that time, hopefully with the context of benefiting the board and honorably doing the people's will. So I think it's a liberty trap, and I take my personal individual constitutional liberties very, very seriously, as I suspect you do as well. And it's for those reasons that I think that a moment of silence is the only vehicle that doesn't tread on somebody's liberty. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
At this point, I think that we're going to have to move forward with just a moment of silence. I, for one, will not water down my prayers to appease someone else. My beliefs are strong, and I won't jeopardize my religious beliefs to accommodate someone else at this point. And I do believe that if it has to be open for all religions and every single person of the community to come forward with their faith, it's going to create a burden on the clerk just to accommodate and make sure that we don't leave someone out and put ourselves in jeopardy. So at this moment, I tend to lean forward just a moment of silence and encourage people to pray.
Commissioner Mullen, I'd like to respond briefly just to clarify, because I may have miscommunicated. I don't see that the Defense of Liberty requires us to open it to every citizen. The board could adopt a policy based on research of other counties, could adopt a policy where recognized ordained clergy from various faiths could come in. Now, certainly with the internet these days, there's an awful lot of people that are able to get a certificate of ordination that we probably couldn't challenge. So it might effectively be the same thing, but I just didn't want to misrepresent. In most cases, it's clergy across all faiths and religions that would maybe be on a schedule to come in and give their invocation, whether it's a prayer to Allah or some other faith. And I think we just need to be open to all, or do our prayers privately ahead of time and then do the moment of silence. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
My concern would be, what if we left someone out? I don't want to put the county in jeopardy as thinking that we purposely did not contact someone to come forward and have liability for the county on that part.
So I've researched this long and hard, and the preamble of our Washington State Constitution reads, "We the people of the state of Washington, gratefully to the supreme ruler of the universe for our liberties, do ordain this Constitution. The Supreme Court allows prayers at city council meetings." Justice Anthony Kennedy, speaking for the court, said, "Prayers and invocations have been a routine feature of legislatures and city councils throughout American history." And he said the court was willing to set specific limits on those prayers. Looking at court cases, Rowan County, North Carolina versus Nancy Lude, that was ruled in the 4th Congressional that they couldn't say it, but the 6th overruled them and said that the council members can say prayers. I mean, we have this debate is going on all over the country. And I think that we, the commissioners, are only asking ourselves for guidance to make the right decision. We're not asking other people to make those decisions for us. We're asking that the Creator help us make the right decisions for Franklin County. So I'm in favor of, and I think if you review the prayers that Commissioner Mullen and I said, it is non-denominational. We're only speaking to the higher power. We're not announcing any religion, and therefore we're only asking for guidance for ourselves. So with that, I'm in favor of a short prayer, non-denominational, asking for guidance.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Peck. All due respect, your recollection of the prayers given to date is incorrect, and you can review the recordings to affirm that. I am strongly in Commissioner Mullen's camp on the point that I will not water down my strongly held personal Christian beliefs. And if public prayer necessitates that, then I'm not going to participate in it. You are correct that the courts have taken a number of positions, and you also noted in what you just said that the Supreme Court had acknowledged that there can be limits placed on public prayer. And that's the side of liberty that is insidious. It is the side, everybody tends to look at who can come in and pray and how they might pray, but the public officials themselves are entitled to liberty also. And when that liberty is infringed upon by me having to water down my prayers so as not to tread on the liberty of someone of disparate faith, then there's a problem. In fact, the truest measure of liberty is when we recognize that others have got disparate faiths and that we don't use our positions, our public positions, to knowingly, intentionally, or otherwise tread on their beliefs. And I really am firm on this particular position. I mentioned last week, by the way, that I'd written a fairly lengthy paper on the point, and I have not sent it. I opted to wait until after we'd had this conversation. And if anybody wishes to see that, then I'll provide it. But I did it mostly for my own understanding and research of our founding fathers and the concepts of a nation founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and the fact that does not mean that other faiths don't have equal standing. In fact, their very premise is that they do have equal standing. And lastly, I don't want someone who has a widely disparate faith to look at us as three white, middle-aged, Anglo-Saxon Christians running these board meetings and have them, rightly or wrongly, justified or not, have them have, I don't know, hesitation, fear, concerns about coming before us and getting a fair hearing, especially if it has to do with a matter of land use for a church or permitting or some other directly or indirectly faith-related issue. I don't want our citizens to even have to think about whether or not we may have a bias. And those, to my mind, are all good reasons to keep it neutral. Not that I don't respect your point of view. We just happen to have a professional disagreement on what's the best path.
So with that, do we have a motion? Because it sounds like we have a disagreement. We'll find out where the cards lay here.
Well, consensus is sufficient, but if the chair prefers a motion, I would move that it be the policy of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners that we make a regular part of our meeting agendas a 30-second moment of silence respecting the individual liberties for people to pray or not of their choosing, that the board effectively do the will of the people.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. So with that, I guess we'll just leave it as it lies right now and move on to...
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Peck, I don't
Go
believe we
ahead,
have that.
Commissioner Peck.
I don't believe we have that option. The chair made a unilateral decision a couple, 2-3 weeks ago, without seeking the board's concurrence, and that doesn't have authority to stand. It either needs to be removed from the agenda, or we come to an agreement as to how it's going to be handled. I'm not going to participate in board meetings wherein there is a policy that openly violates the liberty of some, unless that's a board decision.
Okay, I'm waiting for a consensus here or a motion.
I'll make another motion. I'll make it simpler.
Can you make it simple? Because the last one went on quite a while.
I'm sure you benefited from the content of the last one if you listened carefully. I'll just say that I would move for board adoption of a practice of incorporating a 30-second moment of silence as part of our board meeting agendas.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would move then that we remove any references to invocations, prayers, or moments of silence from the weekly agendas of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners.
There's a motion. Do I hear a second? Hearing no second, the motion fails. Commissioner Mullen, do you have a motion you'd like to make?
I have a question for Sean Sant. Does this create a liability issue for the county?
If we'd like to have a legal discussion, prefer that we go into an executive session to have those discussions rather than discuss in an open meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, I would request an executive session for 15 minutes to entertain the topic that is before us now, since we have legal counsel available.
Keith, are we good to go into executive session at this time? Because we have, can we wait and go into executive session after the candidate? Because they've been waiting on the phone quite a while.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, we certainly could do that.
And can you please give me the RCW? I believe there was a call for another executive session prior to that, besides the one on the agenda, so that would be 3 executive sessions.
Chairman Didier, the RCW for the proposed executive session would be RCW 42.30.110.1, parent I, to discuss with legal counsel.
42.30.110.
Parent 1, parent I.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So with that, we will move on to discussion on assessor replacement.
If I may introduce that, Commissioner, the Franklin County Republican Central Committee has met and has provided 3 nominees or names for the Board of Commissioners to consider to replace the assessor who is leaving county service at the end of the month. Those include Mr. James Jimenez, Miss Piper Mitchell, and a Mr. John Rosenau. They are on the phone, and if it's acceptable to the board, ask that each one of them make a short statement about their background, introduce themselves to the board, and then would ask that the board be able to go into an executive session after that open discussion. And then after the executive session, the board could make a decision whether to appoint one of these individuals or another course of action if that's necessary. But if it's okay, with the permission of the board, would ask Mr. Jimenez to make a brief statement.
Absolutely.
James, are you still on the phone? We may have lost him. Piper, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I thank you for your time today. My name is Piper Mitchell, and I've lived almost my entire life in Franklin County, only leaving for 4 years to attend Eastern Washington University in Cheney, Washington, where I received my bachelor's degree in business management. Upon returning home, I worked for a financial institution, paying property taxes and mortgage insurance for the mortgages the bank held, where I was recruited by the Franklin County Assessor's Office in 1987 and selected for a position here. During my tenure with the county, I have worked in the personal property department. I've been the land segregation clerk, the cartographer, and set the levy rates for the county for the last 30 plus years, serving the last 25 years as the chief deputy to the assessor. During that time, I've performed almost every aspect of the assessor's duties in their absence. For the public, what I'd like to do is make sure that we are receptive and welcoming to their concerns about property tax and in educating them to the process we go through at arriving at value. I'd like to provide more information on the annual revaluation notice that we send out to the property owners if the budget constraints can be adhered to. I believe I'm the best candidate for the job because of my knowledge and experience in the office until the voters have an opportunity through the election process to name the successor for the remainder of Mr. McIndoerfer's term, which would end in December of 2022. So again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenau, are you on the phone?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. My background, primarily the last 25 years or more, has been in leadership and finance and management and banking. I've managed as many as 26 financial centers, the employees up to 500 of them, and funds under management of just over $3 billion. I won't tell you my expertise is in assessment or appraisal, although I have done inspections on mortgages and commercial buildings for lending purposes. But I certainly want to bring to the assessor's office more of a focus on the ethics and values of fairness and honesty and integrity. I want those to guide everything that we in the assessor's office would do and that the employees would do. And I want to make sure that everything that we do is with any type of interaction with the public is caring, courteous, and respectful. So I certainly want to instill those values or enhance those values that are already in that office. I've submitted my resume to each one of the commissioners and certainly afforded them the opportunity to ask any questions at any time. And I thank you for your consideration for that position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jimenez, have you been able to connect? My staff is trying to reach him, but he apparently is not on the phone right at the moment. So if you want to ask questions of the two candidates, Mr. Jimenez, is that you? James, is that you? I don't know if the preference of the board is to ask any questions of the candidates at this time. I do request that we have an executive session that's on the agenda to discuss candidates for appointment to elective office. Certainly stand to the will of the board.
Questions, commissioners, to the candidates?
This is Commissioner Peck. I think one of Mr. Johnson's questions is whether or not the board desired an executive session to have this discussion under the RCW for evaluating qualifications of candidate for employment. So if we're going to have a discussion, that might be an appropriate place to do it. Whatever the board's preference, I'm willing to participate.
Have we got Mr. Jimenez on the phone yet?
Does not appear that he is on the phone.
So do we want to ask questions of the candidates at this time, or do we go into executive session first, Keith?
That is certainly the preference of the board. Just note that any decision would have to be made in an open session.
So are there questions for the candidates from the commissioners?
Yes, Commissioner Peck, I have no questions.
Commissioner Mullen?
Just one question for each of the two individuals on the phone, and that would be what would be your primary focus on the position of running the assessor's office?
Ms. Mitchell, maybe I'll ask you to respond to that. Were you able to hear the question?
Yes, I was. My primary agenda in running the office would be to listen to the public, our taxpayers, and hear their concerns, address them with education, and make sure we're open and honest as we've always been, and hearing their concerns. Within the budget constraints of this office, I believe we've done a good job, and I continue to want to do the same job.
Mr. Rosenau, would you like to respond to the question?
Certainly. Again, as I mentioned, the core values that I want to enhance or build upon in the office definitely deals with fair and equitable service to the residents of the county and the taxpayers. Ethics and absolute fairness, honesty, and integrity need to guide everything being done in there. And then we also need to be human, where our interactions are caring, courteous, and respectful to every single citizen that comes in or person that comes in to be serviced by the commission, by the assessor's office, and meet their needs. So thank you.
Okay, with that then, I guess we will go into executive sessions 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses H.
Commissioner,
go ahead.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I heard a beep. I'm wondering if Mr. Jimenez was able to join us. James, were you able to get on the phone?
No, sorry, this is Jen Johnson. I was in a webinar and now I'm back.
All right, thank you. So please proceed, Commissioner Didier, with the executive session request.
Yeah, the executive session request 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses H. And do the commissioners have the phone-in number, which is different from our regular meeting number? Yes, I do. Okay, all right. Well, then I guess we will.
We need to determine a time frame for that, Mr. Chairman.
What do you think we need? Okay, we'll take 25 minutes with the opportunity to extend. So at this moment, we'll get off the phones and get on to the executive session number.
Sorry, Chairman, who is invited to the exec session?
Well, we'll need legal there.
Yes, legal counsel, the county administrator, members of the Board of Commissioners, and the clerk to the board, and the HR director.
Okay.
Hey, Karen, can you send me the call in, please? Thank you.
Okay, we will go to executive session.
Thank you. On or Jen, are you on?
John's on.
Carly, are you on?
Yep, I'm here.
We're recording, but I need to see if our candidates are available. Try that one more time.
The call cannot be completed. Welcome. To join a conference now, please enter the attendee. The meeting access code you enter.
I don't know why that's. But they had that number to call in on.
This one, 2969?
Yes. I believe, yeah.
We're just waiting for our candidates to get online. Mr. Chairman, you could state for the record that we are out of executive session and back into public session.
We are out of executive session, back into the public section of the meeting. We're waiting for the candidates to get back online.
Okay. Surely do not extend his number. Do you need it? Or do you want it? His number, John's number. 531. Piper, have you rejoined us?
Keith, this is Commissioner Peck. Do you know if the candidates were aware that we were expecting them to rejoin us?
I believe so. Got a message that both of them are calling in.
Okay.
This key. Can you hear me?
What number is she using?
Yeah.
No, 292. Is it 2926?
Sean's on the phone with her. Yeah, the 5856 number. No.
It's not working.
Call in using the 2969 number.
2969.
Yes.
For her call. She needs to call in.
Great, thank you. Well, Commissioners, we have typically two lines open, and one of them is the candidates were on that other line, so they're calling into the correct one. I appreciate your patience.
Okay. same thing she did when she started this morning, same exact. If she can't get it, have her come to this phone and I'll put her on speaker.
How we doing, Keith?
Piper, was that you that just joined us? Or John, was that you?
Yeah, John Rosenau just joined.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, we actually were in the other meeting, number 5856. Sean just advised Piper and I to come in on a different, the 2969 one.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm here as well.
John.
Yeah, John Rosenau just joined.
Did ask if
Piper, are you on yet? Just waiting for Ms. Mitchell.
it's not letting them do it, so she's gonna be on this phone.
Okay.
No, just stay on this line and you'll be on a different phone, but you'll be on the speaker. Thank you. Okay.
All right, we have everybody back online, I believe now, Commissioner.
Okay, we have come out of executive session with no decisions being made, and we are now ready to make a decision on a appointment of a commissioner, and may I correct, it is going to have a special election this November. In 2021 will be the election for the candidates to run for assessor, and I encourage all of you to run for this position, regardless if you're picked for the temporary, because people need to have a choice, and you are all excellent candidates. So with that, I will leave the floor open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, as Commissioner Peck, I move for appointment of Piper Mitchell as the incoming Franklin County assessor to fill the seat until such time as the proper election is held.
Do I hear a second? Hearing no second, the motion dies. Do I hear a motion?
This is Commissioner Mullen. I make a motion that John Rosenau is to fill the position until this November.
We have a motion. Is there a second? I will second that motion. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Peck, as I've mentioned earlier, I know Mr. Rosenauer, a wonderful gentleman, great resume, lots of wonderful experience, and I may have mentioned somewhere along that he's an aviator as well, which gets some extra points in my book. But the fact of the matter is, we have an employee who has served the county faithfully for 33 years in the assessor's office, possesses an absolute wealth of expertise and experience that will be much harder to replace than I think most people realize. So, no disrespect to Mr. Rosenauer in the least, wonderful gentleman and great resume, but I think in this case, Ms. Mitchell is clearly the most qualified person to take on that position. So I'll continue to support her for the position, but understand that that is not the motion on the table at this time. Thanks for letting me speak.
I would just have to say that this is a very, very tough decision. We want all of you to all run for the assessor's office this November, and that we do not want to lose anybody in the assessor's office, and that I think with the addition of Mr. Rosenoff, we can have an incredible team in the assessor's office. And I just ask that you all work together for the benefit of Franklin County. and we'll let the people have the choice in November. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Mullen. I just feel that if the office to run smoothly, that we should keep the positions the way they are. And I encourage everyone to run for the election, because this really should be the choice of the people. And if we're going to continue the office to run smoothly, I just feel that we should keep the positions the way they are until the election. This came on suddenly. No one, at least I didn't realize that Peter was going to step aside. But I do believe this position should be picked by the people. And I think that the office will just run smoothly with the positions the way they are right now, and let the people decide this November.
Further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Let it be recorded. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we need to go into executive session 42.30.110, parentheses 1, parentheses I. Keith, what time frame do you think we need for this one?
I think we better schedule 30 minutes with the
Okay.
opportunity to come back out.
Okay, we'll go into executive session. Again, we're gonna dial in. I think I got it down now this time. I hope I can get her done a little quicker. So, with that, we will move into executive session.
Commissioner, if I may, just
Yes.
state for the record who's invited to participate in that. It would be
Yes.
myself and the clerk and the prosecuting attorney's office and the commissioners.
Welcome. If you are the meeting host,
Sean here.
Commissioner Mullen here.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goodyear.
Thank you.
Keith, do you hear me? I'm here. Are we all back on?
Confirmation.
Commissioner Clark.
Okay, we have everybody that's required now. Thank you.
We have come out of executive sessions with no decisions being made, and we are resuming the discussion on the prayer.
So, Mr. Chairman, thanks for the good discussion in executive session. It certainly seems to me that all three commissioners are of like mind with respect to religious liberties. With that said, I move that the Franklin County Board of Commissioners undertake a policy that foregoes beginning our meetings with prayer or even a moment of silence. And in lieu of that, that we encourage all of our citizens to join us, if they see fit, in pre-meeting prayers, either on the steps of the courthouse or some other suitable location. And that's the end of the motion. I'll speak more in discussion as to the purposes why.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
So this is Commissioner Peck. The motion, of course, assumes that this doesn't present any legal complications for the county, and I'm making the motion ahead of even getting word back from the prosecutor's office because, frankly, it's a public place, and prayer in a public place, to my knowledge, is not restricted under our Constitution. This concept of the motion is that this is a voluntary opportunity, certainly open to all county employees, all county citizens. And that we're doing this, in my view, I'm recommending this as a way for us to exercise the free expression of our religious beliefs in the public square, and to do it in a way that doesn't bring complication, risk, litigation costs, or other maladies on the citizens of Franklin County. So it is a manner of respecting and encouraging our religious expressions, but doing it in a way that doesn't bring risk upon the citizens.
Further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
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 I abstain. Motion passes. With that, I don't see anything more further on the agenda. Keith, is there something I'm missing?
No, sir, there's no callers on the line for public comment.
Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned.